Okay, I'd like to apologize for making this short break. I'd like to welcome Grandmaster Eric Hansen from Canada. He's now officially here with us.
Happy to be here, guys, for the next few days. I think first time in Serbia and first time at the European Club Cup, so pretty exciting for me. Really nice playing hall, and I haven't really checked the games today yet, Miodrag, but a lot of my favorite players were playing, which is why uh, I already have a game that I'm not sure if you covered. But one player who's always very interesting to me is Naidic, whether he's going to play really bad or really well. Very unstable player, but when he's in good form, he's one of the best.
Wow, we're just having some really good moves here.
So, just as I was talking about that, rook takes e5 happened. So, let's go from the start. I just want to see what happened. First round, you get to see these 500-point matchups. See what the top players prepare when they play somebody much weaker. Okay, Rosalimo, BC6, very topical these days. E5, that's not the most well-known move. It's playable, but white, yeah, usually knight f6 is played here, or even sometimes knight h6 and f6. But the point is white is opening up the position against the two bishops, but black has some structural problems with this d7 pawn c6. He wants to play d5 eventually, but then c6 becomes weak, so it's just a little slow to get those bishops really active. As we'll see in the game, knight c3, if you were to play d5 as black here, you have to watch out bishop g5.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just one move too slow. They might still both be even in theory here, but that's why white can get away with this this opening of the center. Rook b8, e5. So he's not in time. Maybe d6 had to have been played, but bishop g5 is still with tempo. So e5.
Well, the major idea about black should be to play d5 or to somehow open up the game for his bishops, I guess.
Yeah. No, once e5 happens, this is a pretty common structure. The e5 pawn controls black's idea very naturally, because now you don't want to play d5 as much. You're left with this isolated pawn. So it looks like a case where Arkash just got a very comfortable edge from the opening, and as we see in a few more moves, bishop e3.
I believe this is already a great position for white.
Yes. Although I'm wondering, if queen c7 here, what's the idea? Maybe just rook c1 sort of thing?
I guess so.
Queen c7, rook c1. I mean,
Queen
I'm
c7,
a bit
maybe
surprised.
knight b5, rook c1.
Knight b5, queen b6.
Yeah, rook c1, you're right.
It looks like that might have been just a better try anyways for black, though, because after bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, bishop e5, bishop c5, this is nice for white. Just a better pawn structure. Just a much better pawn structure, and the pin caused by the bishop on c5 is extremely annoying. As we see here, d6, rook ad1, everything's with tempo, and for a very active tactical player like Naidic, these moves are second nature to him. He doesn't have to think at all. Rook ad1, now rook takes e5, threat, queen c7,
But
rook
he
takes
came-
e5 anyways, and after the very natural here, probably d takes. Well, actually, what do you do? Do you take? If you take back on c5, I expect probably just rook to e2 and maybe just play with a bit of a better structure, or even potentially rook d1 to e1.
But let's explain first what happens in case of d takes e5.
If d takes e5, he's going to be playing bishop d6 first,
Yeah. Queen
b7,
b7.
and after queen
You
b7,
can make the moves.
bishop here, queen b7. I was thinking at first his idea is he's not going to take the exchange right away. Maybe some
No.
move like queen f6, but
Queen f6, knight e6, knight e5 maybe.
yeah, well, with queen f6, I'm just curious, just this move. But with the open D file,
But in
these
that case, bishop e5.
bishop e5. Yeah, that's right. That just wins on the
Yeah.
spot. Bishop e5 is bishop e5 is just the very
Yeah.
very strong threat.
Spirit wins over material. We don't want to get the material back. We just want to mate the guy.
Well, this is a big problem because you can't put your queen on d7. You can put it on d8, but after d8, bishop takes e5. You're hitting the queen and still hitting the rook. So at the minimum, you might be threatening queen f6 with this
Exactly.
checkmate, but otherwise you're winning a pawn. Bishop c5. I mean, this is the idea. Queen f6.
This is almost winning, yeah.
No other move. Queen b7, queen f6, knight c6, and now you were suggesting knight e5.
Yeah, why not?
So knight e5, let's say rook d8. I'm not sure which rook.
Because I have an option of taking on d8, f8 or b8 whenever I like. Uh-huh.
That makes those lines were just way too dangerous.
Okay.
This position, I guess we can't. Queen f6 is once again a normal
Absolutely.
threat because the one problem with a move like rook e2 and saying, hey, white has a better structure long term is black is getting way too active. Potentially, you don't want to maybe allow knight f5 or knight c6, knight d4. Queen f6 just seems very concrete. The knight can't go to c6.
Knight c6 doesn't work in a view of rook c5.
Rook
Yeah.
e8 doesn't
Yeah.
work. And if something like this, we have the very easy knight d5.
Maybe even
and
rook
takes
f5. Rook f5,
Or rook
f5
f5.
first.
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
the
yeah.
knight e5. Yeah,
Rook
exactly.
f5.
Yeah, exactly. Hmm.
So this is against, I believe, a player from the club, the Smashing Pawns from Luxembourg. I think that's...
Yeah, but wait a sec. Maybe here in this position they can play rook d8 and you cannot take because of checkmate. But okay, you'll move your rook to d3 and it's the matter of time. Yeah, it's winning.
So that's... Okay, yeah.
This is great.
Yeah, we're being maybe even a little sloppy here. We could play rook d3, but this sort of idea...
This is a good
If I
game.
want to be even more correct, I might even almost play g4 and do the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Knight d5 and g4.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah, g4, like you said, yeah. Followed by 95, 97. This is almost winning game. This is a nice game by white.
what team does Nidich play on? Because he used to be on Sokar, but that team has collapsed. They were pretty much one of the biggest clubs in the world
Yeah,
from Azerbaijan. He plays for Azerbaijan, but that team isn't playing this year.
that's soccer's second team. I just spoke about that previously. I even mentioned the team.
Have you seen this game at Lakov Klein?
No. So it's
So this is a
something
St.
new.
Petersburg club, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of nice because I think, from what I know, all those guys, a lot of the guys on that team are good friends, and that's not necessarily very common in chess. But a few of those guys they all work with Peter Svidler, who is kind of like the leader of St. Petersburg.
So it's a good chemistry
The
between the
chemistry
guys.
it looks like they have good chemistry. They work together on chess, they travel together.
I believe it's the most important thing.
Yeah. For a team event, I experienced that this year at the Olympiad as well. So let's fast forward here.
Mm-hmm.
Playing a 2300, so not a pushover by any means. And okay, if we get to the current position, I won't even go from the start. We had the knight on a6 is the first thing that jumps out to me. I don't like the knight on a6. I like the knight on e2 for white. That's going to go to f4, d4, which both put pressure on e6, one of the weak points. f4 makes more sense because you have to defend e5 still with your bishop. But otherwise, I'm not liking this knight on a6. I like white's position here.
White is definitely, in my opinion, even maybe
Much better?
He's probably going to use some knight b8, knight e7, or knight c6 ideas, but white is going to play knight d4. But in that case, e5 pawn is hanging.
Yeah, no, that's why I didn't play knight d4 right
That's
away.
why I said knight to f4.
Because
Yeah.
you can't play g5. g5 is very typical.
Then knight h5, knight f6.
Yeah, and that's not usually as black. You don't want to allow the structure because the knight's very, very effective on f4. The pawn on e5 is just great. I can see some positions, maybe bishop to d4,
Mm-hmm.
queen to d2, queen d2, knight f4, bishop d3. You can double on the c file. You can play both sides of the board very easily. Black can't do the same. The bishop on b7 is not too happy here. Knight on a6. What do you do with the knight on a6? It's a worse piece. Well, one way you pretty much have to play knight b8. Unless you play bishop b8 and knight c7. But what is a knight doing on c7, or what does it plan to do? Does it have a good path? And I don't see that.
Yeah,
The most what I see is knight b8, knight d7 as maybe a natural regrouping. But Matt Lakoff here has to be very happy.
Yeah.
Who do you think? I don't know if you discussed it, but who's your favorite to win the event?
Well, I like Paravatim very much from Italy. On the first board, they have Ashia. Ashia is like third player according to rating in the world. Then they have Aronian. It's extremely strong team in my opinion. Of course, Siberia is strong. They won this competition last year. It's going to be very intense. What do you think? And yours?
Siberia is one of my picks. Padova, they've had a strong team for a few years, but the problem is they're not too strong on the lower boards.
Yeah.
And there's Russian teams with 2700s on the lower boards, so I wouldn't put them near the top, just because I think they really need an amazing performance from Aronian and MVL, which is possible, but there's six players per match, right?
Yeah,
6 boards.
Exactly.
So having three let's say lower rated ones. Also, they have Gelfand, and it depends how he plays, because he played quite poorly recently at the Tal Memorial. On the other hand, he won against Anarkiev in a match, so he doesn't play much, and his results are very mixed. Same with Peter Leko. He hardly plays, and his results haven't been too good. But those guys, if they do end up playing, then their top 4 boards are the strongest out of any team, in my opinion. Leko, Gelfand, Aronian, and Maxime. If they're all in good form, okay, this team is crazy strong, but that hasn't been happening lately. So I have Siberia as the most solid, but teams like St. Petersburg are always very competitive with them because of things like chemistry. So, but probably a Russian team there. How's Alkaloid?
Alkaloid is second team by average, 27-41, I believe. I've been just talking about that a couple of teams here have Chinese on the 5th board. For example, Yu Yang 27-30, Li Chao 27-25, or the opposite. These guys playing on the 5th board, it's those teams are just so strong. So I don't know. Yeah, Alkaloid is a strong team.
So what happened here is he played f4, and that's a very easy move to understand.
Exactly.
Now he does want to put the knight on d4.
Definitely.
He wouldn't take away a square from his knight unless he was sure there's another square. He's going to play probably knight d4, something like knight d4.
Threatening knight c6 or queen a4.
Knight d4, queen a4, bishop d3 sort of moves. Knight c6 as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm expecting a continuation like knight b8. Because what else for black? I'm happy to look at other counterplay. I'm just not happy. I just don't see what the active plan there. Knight here, and you're almost looking like moves like queen d7, because in a move like this, let's say knight c6. Although I like the knight so much, I wouldn't do that. I would throw in a move like queen a4 first, or maybe
I'm thinking even about some ideas. Knight b5, knight e6.
Knight b5 and knight d6 at
maybe
a certain point. Maybe queen d4 here.
Queen d4 first, followed by knight a6. Exactly.
Something like this. We have to be a little bit careful, but a lot of good options, which is why we think this position is very good for white. But even knight c6, which I wouldn't do. That's such a nice knight on c6. This bishop on c7 is really poor. So okay, he did something different, but. Now you probably want to move your queen so that after rook c1 you can take back with another rook. The bishop's not particularly good there. The knight's not good there because it wants to go to d4. So here is especially a time where queen b3 or queen a4 looks quite natural. So some possible continuation, rook c1, rook c1, rook c8. Black, what to do, because you're just suffering here. And now it'd be up to white to decide, do I trade even more and still go into a good endgame, but At the same time, it's easier for my opponent to let him trade off pieces, like some continuation, like rook c8, bishop c8, knight d4. I like white, but he has such a nice position that it's hard for me to figure out if this is really an improvement or not. This bishop is still really bad. This knight is still really bad. These minor pieces are going to be quite effective. When the bishop goes to d3, the bishop on b2 would like to be on h4 or something.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that's really the right plan, so maybe he does have to think here because he wants. I mean, the low-rated player, one idea there is to just. I mean, they're going to make a mistake at some point. This position is a really uncomfortable position, and not allowing them to trade off pieces is going.
He's gonna try to trade off pieces, thinking that exchanging pieces should help him to equalize the game. But on the opposite here, if you trade off pieces along the c file, the position is just getting harder. So this is good position for white.
Well, it's a good position, but would you trade on the c file? Because it's a good position in every variation. It's a static advantage, but
Yeah.
if you trade the rooks, what's your winning plan? If I don't trade the rooks, we have ideas I know you might like to play even knight d4 and g4
Absolutely.
at some point, and
With the-
that's only going to
yeah.
happen with more pieces on the board.
Yeah. But okay, in such position,
Actually,
it looks too risky to do that.
Well, actually, I mean,
Rook takes c1, okay, rook c8.
you like to play moves like g4 and queen c2,
Mm-hmm.
g6, and you're holding on. You're holding on. You could trade here, and this is still a very bad bishop on c8 and a bad bishop on b8. But as I'm saying, it's Matlakov is a very solid player. I
Okay,
expect him to
but
go for some comfortable edge.
At a moment, we open up the g file, which could give some counter
It
chances
could give
for
some
black.
counterplay. It could give
So
some counterplay.
probably he should avoid this crazy stuff like like you said I used to do.
Well, but I think, do you keep the rook on f1 or do you allow trades on the c file? Because if you keep the rook on f1, you should just play rook takes c1 now. Your knight wants to go to d4, your bishop wants to stay on b2. You don't want black to just play rook c8, and our queen is not particularly good on c1. So for example, rook takes c8, rook takes c8, g4, not g. Okay, I'm thinking about g4 just
Do
because
you
I
know
like
what
those
kind of idea maybe I have? Queen a4 followed by bishop d3, and when you try to trade off the rooks, I might just move my rook from the c file.
I'm gonna play here.
Uh-huh.
I'm just gonna try to trade.
Maybe
It's not good.
first bishop to d3.
First bishop to d3, and now that's gonna give black time to play knight here,
Yeah, but in that case,
or even this move queen to d7. Let's
yeah,
say.
this one doesn't look.
Queen to
doesn't look that
d7,
convincing.
knight d4, threatening maybe bishop b5, knight c7. It still looks horrible to me. Actually, maybe what's wrong? This bishop d3 has to be played at some point. So what he did, do you think he's going to put the bishop to c1? That's what makes sense to me. And he's going to put it to d2 and maybe reroute it at some point. Maybe bishop d2, queen h5.
Maybe some b5 followed by bishop before, but it would be too
The
much
knight is so
concession.
bad on a6. We don't want to give it c5.
Yeah,
But
mostly.
maybe now queen h5, bishop d2, queen h5, and you're going to provoke weaknesses without
You want to
necessarily
go on
playing.
the other side of the board.
Because what I like is a c file can be taken, for example, rook c8, bishop d2, but there are
Mhm.
no useful entry squares. So after knight c7, queen h5. Or even if the knight stays on a6 and black has this c files, I think it's symbolic because just
Yeah.
g4 now or queen h5, and where's that rook going to c4? If it goes to c4, I'll play bishop to d3 immediately and be very happy. So
Also probably king going at some point with a queen on h5 going to f2, playing the rook g1 and g4.
yeah,
Because the rook on c file cannot reach the queen side on any of these squares. I'm talking about the c3, c2, and c1 squares. Yeah, okay. This game
could
is...
be a game to follow, kind of instructive to see how to cash in your advantage as white in these sort of stonewall structures. But I don't think you should trade everything off. So he's keeping the rook on f1. I'm guessing we're going to check back on that later, but I wouldn't be surprised to see queen h5, g4, some sort of rook lift or rook f2, h3, g4, then rook g2,
Mhm.
any of these sort of ideas. But black's bishops and that knight on a6 are really, really decentralized and
You know what?
ineffective.
Sorry for interrupting. During this stream, I was checking the game played by Ding Liran. He's playing the Dragon Variation, very instructive one. Very
I
nice.
got it up. Yep.
Yeah, against the Hanging Pawns. And I very much like what he's doing in this game. He's playing against the Hanging Pawns. And at the beginning of this stream, I just said it's going to be very difficult for black to handle this, defending this pawns on c5 and d5. Did you see that? 91, rook e2, rook d2. This is very nice idea.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with hanging pawns is if you're a really, really good player, you can handle them. But for most players, it's kind of like an isolated pawn.
Absolutely.
It's much easier to play on the other side. And you show up to Serbia in round one, you're playing black. You have hanging pawns, you're playing Ding Liren. I mean, it's a really good experience. I wish I was playing.
Mhm.
But it's also not such a comfortable thing to endure because you have to play very precise. One of the most precise games I've seen in the hanging pawns, because I think white does quite well, is I believe last year Wesley So lost as white to Nidic in Dortmund, and that's sort of the Nidic is he can play very accurately in sort of these imbalanced positions, but it's not a common trait among chess players to be very
Yeah.
very well versed in hanging pawns. I recently tried to study it a bit more because I feel like I've also been a bit weak there. But in this position, yeah, what can we say? White has all the white's targeting c5, d5, and black doesn't know
He's
what's the point of
threatening
penetration.
at some point bishop f6, bishop a3. He's got the knight a3 exerting the pressure in the c5, knight a3, knight f4 at some point, bishop a3. So many good ideas and
So this is a
okay.
good move.
Okay, but in case he goes with some d4 at some point with a rook e1, knight f3, some crazy stuff.
No, he's just going to play knight g5 to e4,
Okay. Yeah.
and then maybe h5, h4. I mean, this is just a tactical reply to white's pressure. Is that okay? If you play bishop takes d5, bishop d5, rook d5, I do have this check. Although, and you know, after king g2, queen f2 doesn't lead to some sort of checkmate probably, but knight f2 with tempo, the knight goes back to e4. But and black is okay there because they're trading weaknesses. White's advantage was he had a very solid, easy to play position. But what's come to my attention is it might not be in this particular position, but in some structures I've seen a positional exchange sacrifice: rook d5, bishop d5, queen d5.
Yeah,
And
I like it.
you have an amazing bishop on g2. You have a much better structure, and you have a knight and a pawn. If you win that second pawn, then it's like you have just a better position.
Yeah.
As it is now, I think it's imbalanced, but what I didn't like about this was rook d8 and rook d2. Otherwise, aesthetically, this looks like full compensation to me because at some point I'm going to play h4. This knight's going to have to retreat, and there's white just has domination over the light squares.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
that's like a positional idea. I'm not sure.
It's nice for the viewers to see just a